I want to state my appreciation for all these submissions I've been receiving lately, and on top of that, people have been submitting much longer stories than usual too, and that helps a lot. With that being said, I really want to do some themed videos again soon. Specifically, road trip and gas station stories, and creepy things seen on mountains. So if you've got any stories like that, send them over at darkstories.org. As for today's episode, it features stories about creatures that whisper your name, spirits that linger, and Native American legends come to life. So let's begin. It Called My Name, from Jay, Not Jack. Everyone calls me Jay since I was a kid. Even my parents call me Jay. When I was 14, we lived in the city, and my parents had us move out to a rural area. My sisters and I were very upset leaving our childhood home and friends, but we got over it quickly once we saw how beautiful the new house was. It was on a street with 8 other homes that were far away from each other. There was also loads of farmland and a huge forest on the one side of our house. I grew to love the woods out there over the years, and I would often go out and explore them with my dog Loki. I have this particularly favorite spot in the woods beside a river and a grassy embankment. I like to go out there and sit and watch my dog play in the water. Now, I was 17 then when my parents let me move into the old guest room on the main floor, which was much bigger than my room. It had these beautiful huge windows that overlooked the forest side of the house. I was really happy to have some privacy as a young man, and loved sleeping in my new room. But one thing that was odd was that my dog stopped sleeping on my bed and preferred to sleep up in my old room without me, which I thought maybe was because of habit. So I didn't try to force Loki to sleep with me in my new bedroom. I'm kind of dense, so I don't really realize when strange things are going on. But now that I look back on it, it was obvious that something was wrong. One night after I'd gone to bed around 11, I thought I saw movement out in the woods through the window. I was excited, hoping to see a deer or even a bear walking in the woods, but all I could see was a little bit of movement, and it stopped when I reached the window. But then I saw these yellowish red eyes looking at me just before they disappeared. Disappointed, I went to my bed and I lay down to go to sleep. Around 1 a.m., I heard scratching from under my window. I decided to ignore it. I went back to sleep thinking nothing of it. At most, it was a raccoon or skunk, I thought. After another couple of hours, I heard something stranger. Jack. The way my name was said in a whisper was unnerving, and it ended with a click for the K. Thinking I was having a weird dream, I turned over and went back to sleep. A couple of weeks later, I forgot about this whole incident, but my dog Loki, who's a black Labrador, was acting more skittish than usual the next few days, and he outright refused to walk with me in the woods. A week after that, a heat wave had started and was going on for a couple of days, so I opened my windows all the way to get some airflow in my room. We only had 2 AC window units, and they were upstairs, one in my sister's shared room and one in my parents' room. So I went to bed that night, lying on top of the sheets because it was so hot and I was sweating through my pajamas. A couple of hours later or so, I heard that same scratching again, and my name once more being called. It was louder now. Jack. Freaked out, I walked over to the window and looked outside, but I didn't see anything weird. So I shut them and locked them. Then I went and made sure all the other windows were closed and locked before I went upstairs to talk to my dad. My dad is a mechanic and a big guy. He's 6'3", so I instantly felt safer when I went into my parents' bedroom. I shook my dad awake, and he looked at me concerned. He sat right up and asked, "Something wrong, son?" I nodded and replied, "There's someone outside calling my name." He looked at me a little skeptical, probably thinking I had a nightmare, but I'm glad my dad always takes me seriously, and he came with me back down to my room. He looked out the window and turned off the light. Then he situated himself onto my bed, just waiting. Not even 40 minutes later, again I heard my name being called from outside. I looked towards my dad. "Dad, did you hear that?" He nodded, then whispered back, "Don't move. Just stay where you are and be quiet." We lay on my bed, still and quiet, listening to the creepy voice say my name over and over until it got closer to the window. When it got close enough, my dad jumped off the bed, jumping right out the window, ripping through the screen. I jumped up and ran to the window, shocked at what my dad had done. But then I saw the assailant. My dad's outburst had scared it, as it was now running off back into the woods. My heart sank as I looked at it. A large, almost 7-foot-tall, skinny, bony creature scrambled into the woodline, my dad cussing after it, then turning to face me, telling me to shut the windows and open the back door to let him in. I heard my dog barking from upstairs. I rushed to follow my dad's orders, shutting the windows and opening the door in a hurry. He ran inside, and we closed and locked the door behind him. My dad and I ran up the stairs, and my family were already waiting at their bedroom doors, wondering what in the world was going on. My dad had all of us go into my parents' bedroom, and my sister sat on my parents' bed, petting Loki. My dad opened up the closet and opened his gun safe. He handed his pistol to my mom and one of his 2 rifles to me, and told my mom to call the police and say some freaky person tried to get into Jay's room. She also made sure to let them know that we were armed for our safety, just in case that thing or person came back. My sisters were terrified, and as my mom called the cops, my dad and I went downstairs to guard the doors with our weapons. 15 minutes later, 2 police officers showed up at the door. My dad took them back to my bedroom and explained to them what happened, giving them a description of the creature that had run into the woods. The police looked nervous and went out and searched the field around my window. My dad and I watched from my room as they looked around. When the police noticed something, they called for backup, and 10 minutes later 2 more police cars showed up. They searched those woods for 2 more hours, at least. The police looked particularly interested in this one spot and took a lot of pictures of it. The 2 police officers that first showed up, they said whoever it was now long gone and we shouldn't worry. But me and my father stayed up the rest of the night guarding the doors. The next morning we packed up and went to stay with my grandparents for a while. After staying with them for a couple of weeks, we went back to our house and felt a little bit better about being there. My dad would always make sure everything was locked up at night, and I was moved back up to my old room at the top of the stairs. Even though I was back in that house and not in the bigger room anymore on the main floor, I still felt as if I was being watched every time I was outside. I would no longer go on my walks anymore, and my dog Loki would sleep on the bed again, but would whine sometimes at night. I couldn't help but think that he could sense the thing outside. A couple of months passed, and I was asleep in my room one night when I heard Loki whine, then get up and crawl under my bed. I thought I was having a bad dream, as I could hear my name being called like before, but this time it was outside my bedroom door on the 2nd floor of our house. I opened my eyes and saw my bedroom door slowly opening, and I could see that creature from before, hunched over, standing in the doorframe, smiling with a wide mouth that only had a handful of teeth. It was clutching at the doorframe, smiling with a wide mouth that only had a handful of teeth, clutching at the doorframe with skinny, bony limbs and those yellowish red eyes staring right into mine. I screamed, and my dad came flying out of his bedroom with his pistol, which by then he had kept close to him at his bedside table. As soon as he saw the creature, it turned to face him. He aimed and fired 3 times, the creature screeching and clicking in the most awful way as it scrambled down the staircase, back out the door that someone had forgotten to lock. I was crying so hard my mom couldn't calm me down, as my dad called the police, and he searched the house, but he didn't find anything, not even blood. The next morning, my mom and dad were looking at new houses to buy and move into. We were out of that place in a month, and I can't say I miss it, but sometimes I get this weird pull to go back there. My parents are extreme believers in the supernatural now. My mom even got a shaman to bless our new house. I'm 20 years old now, and this new house is close to where we used to live when I was a kid, and close to my old friends again. It's not as big, but at least it's far away from any woods. Stalked in the Woods, from Silver Bullet 54. You always have them in the mountains. Bears, foxes, wolves, deer, even an odd puma or two. You also have less large but also dangerous creatures like fire ants, hornets, and spiders. However, a creature I encountered with my ex-girlfriend in 2011 was unlike any of those. To be honest, I still don't know what it was. I'd just finished a college research paper I was doing, and I decided that a nice hike would help me chill out a bit. I called up my then girlfriend, let's call her Casey, and she suggested just going through the Appalachian Mountains. Since I live in a state with parts of the chain of mountains, it was a perfect idea. I told my dad where I was going, and he said, "That's a bad idea. There's lots of things in those woods. Mountains are even worse." I figured my dad was just being his normal cantankerous self, but I assured him I'd be careful. Before I left, he told me, "Whatever you do, don't go hiking at night." At this time, I wish I'd asked him why. When Casey and I made it out there, we stopped the first 3 days as soon as dusk approached. But on the 4th day of hiking, it had rained, so we set out when it finally stopped to make up time. That would have been around 5. I soon noticed, though, that there were no cicadas, crickets, or even leafcutter bees. Casey told me it was too late in the year. It's mid-August. I hear cicadas as late as early September, I told her. Eventually, it got dark, and I noticed something else strange. It was in the mid-60s, but no fireflies were out either. Casey wasn't nervous, but I was. I'm not the bravest guy in the world, but even a braver guy would find that strange. I decided not to bring up the fact that I always see them in summer, pretty much everywhere from yards to forests. Before I took another step, I heard a loud crack right behind me. I spun around, and I saw something terrifying. It was 9 feet tall, and it was just a black mass. I stuttered Casey's name, asking her, "Do you see this?" I turned my head and she was staring at it too, her mouth hanging open. I wanted to run, but it felt as if my legs were in cement. I eventually heard Casey start sprinting away, which got my legs to start moving too. We eventually reached an area with some cabins and ran into the first one. It was occupied, but the door had been unlocked. The man inside freaked out, but Casey said, "You won't believe what we just saw." And I added, "A gigantic black mass." The man's face lit up with understanding, which was the last thing I expected. He said, "So you've seen the Bear Man?" "The Bear Man?" Casey asked. The man told us that the Bear Man was a name given to what many people of Native American blood saw as a forest spirit, almost like Sasquatch is to people like the Iroquois or Utes. Turns out he was Lenape, like me, and was surprised I'd never heard of it. I informed him I was only 1/10 Lenape, so no one in my family talks about it. He told me the spirit was malevolent, but never killed anyone. That scared the heck out of me, because he was basically saying it had hurt people before, just not killed them. He let us spend the night and made us breakfast the next morning. We immediately left afterwards and made it back to my area after another 5 days of hiking. We always stopped when the sun began to set and took melatonin to fall asleep quickly. When I got back home, my dad asked how it went. I replied, it was fine. As I went to my room to unpack, I heard my dad clearly say he saw the Bear Man to my girlfriend. Possible Skinwalker in Fishlake National Forest. From One I'm Scared One. My dad, my youngest brother, and I were driving to Fishlake National Forest to meet my little brother at Boy Scout summer camp. I would have gone earlier in the week because I'm a troop member myself, but I had high school sports to prepare for that fell on the same week of the summer camp. Anyway, on the drive up I noticed some destroyed and abandoned houses and buildings. I thought they were kind of creepy, but I didn't think anything more of it. When we finished driving up, it was late in the afternoon, and we met up with my brother. After that, we got situated and went to bed. Night fell and I settled down in my hammock, close to my dad and brother's tent, and I drifted off. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night to a large thud sound. Disgruntled, I looked up and around, then another thud. Confused, I kept looking around, trying to see what was going on. It was thud, 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 and the thuds continued almost in rhythm. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced out to the road and saw a figure, but something was off about it. It didn't take long to see why. This silhouette in the moonlight stood 9 feet tall. Its limbs were skinny and long, its ribs were visible, appearing as if it had never eaten a thing in its life. Yet there it was, fully alive. The thuds were its footsteps sounding across the gravel road. I was in awe of it. I'd never seen something that unnatural before. Suddenly, my headlamp, that was inside my hammock pocket, fell out and onto a rock. Though the sound wasn't that loud, to me it sounded like I had just shot a gun. The thuds suddenly stopped. Then, the creature, who was almost out of my field of vision, turned its head towards me. I froze, hoping it wouldn't see me. As the thing stared in my direction, I started to hear voices. Whispers, to be exact. They sounded like my family and friends calling out my name. For the sake of anonymity, let's just say my name is Jack. Jack. These voices called softly to me. I didn't move. Jack. The voices repeated my name louder. I recognized them. Parents, brothers, best friend, cousins, classmates. They sounded like they were coming from everywhere. Jack! The voices screamed all at once, and I refused to move still. I saw the thing's gaze still fixed on me, orange-red eyes looking towards me. Tears streamed down my face because of how scared I was, but I didn't make a sound, and I didn't move. Suddenly, the voices stopped, and the thing turned away. It continued thudding down the road until it left my field of view. But just as I saw it leave my sight, it seemed to go down on all fours, and the shape of its body changed. I stayed awake until sunrise. My dad woke up a little bit after, and he noticed that I was awake. He then asked me, "Hey, did you hear that thudding last night?" Out of fear of being seen as crazy, I lied. "No," I replied. "I slept the entire night." Luckily for me, this was the day we left. I don't think I could have handled another night there after that. But before we left, I heard the owner of the area in which we were camping talking with the scoutmaster. I heard him mention something about how he found a full-grown male bear mauled and partially eaten in the woods near his house, and how he had no idea how anything could have done that. Terrified, I rushed my family out of the campsite. I don't want to ever come back. Every word of this story is true, but of course it's up to you to decide if you want to believe it or not. But heed this advice. If you ever go to Fishlake National Forest, be careful and silent during the night. Otherwise, something may hear you, and that you don't want. 2 Unexplainable Experiences from Keyboard Clacker. My life has been largely devoid of encounters with the paranormal. I haven't encountered any bizarre entities, nor have I been chased by any cryptids. I even live in Bigfoot country, but I've never encountered everyone's favorite big smelly ape. So far, I've only had 2 brushes with anything paranormal. They're small experiences, but they usually put a chill down people's spines, so I thought I'd share them here. I will say I'm a skeptic. I don't discount the paranormal, but I take any stories with a grain of salt. The fact is that most ghostly experiences can be explained within the confines of nature. By way of example, I was told my recently purchased home is allegedly haunted. A coworker's daughter was friends with a girl who used to live here, and the 2 of them reported hearing all sorts of strange noises in the upstairs bedroom. Well, it is an old house and makes old house noises. There's evidence of rodent activity in the attic as well. I've personally heard scratching from the walls upstairs. To sum it up, what the kids thought were ghosts were probably just squirrels and creaky walls. It's a boring explanation, but the most plausible. With that in mind, there are 2 experiences in my life that have no boring but plausible explanations. They did occur in the same town, but not in the same location. Given the nature of the experiences, I feel it's important to add that I'm of sound mind. I've never experienced hallucinations of any sort, and I suffer from no diagnosed mental illnesses that could result in hallucinations. I've never consumed drugs, and I can literally count on one hand the number of times I've consumed alcohol. With all that out of the way, on to the experiences. The first occurred around 2007 in a Walmart of all places. I was attending a local college, and unfortunately my schedule landed in such a way that I had a 3-hour gap between classes. Having spending money and wanting to kill some time, I decided to go to Wally World to pick up some random stuff I didn't really need. The store was pretty much dead that day, and even the music piping through the PA system seemed to be playing at a lower volume. I was meandering through the store and found myself walking by the jewelry section. Then, an angry voice whispered my name in my ear. I could even feel hot breath. But no one was there. In fact, no one was within 30 feet of me. Surprisingly, I wasn't afraid. I was puzzled, but not afraid. I didn't feel threatened at all. It was just a totally baffling experience. I've heard similar whispers on and off since then, but since they've occurred upon waking from a deep sleep, I dismiss them. I've never had something whisper in my ear while I was wide awake and aware since that day in 2007. With no history of hallucinations of any sort, I have no explanation for this experience. The second experience occurred around 2016. I had just moved into a small apartment on the second story of a duplex, which I shared with a woman and her daughters who rented the ground floor. I'd been living in the apartment for about 2 weeks when the strange event occurred. I was off work, and my neighbors weren't home that day, so the place was quiet, save for road noise from the nearby highway. My front door was locked and I lived alone. I decided to take advantage of the quiet by sitting to meditate. I'd been practicing meditation for 6 years at that point. It's nothing dramatic. All I did was sit cross-legged, eyes shut, and focused on my breathing. Never could manage the lotus position. Anyway, I sat with my back to my bed and facing the bedroom wall. I entered a relaxed state after a few minutes, and I was just enjoying the calm when I heard someone walk into the room. I could both hear and feel the weight of their footfalls. Whoever it was walked behind me, then stood beside me. They paused. Then I felt a thump as if someone flopped down on the floor next to me. When I looked over there, no one was there. Again, I didn't feel afraid or threatened. I felt as if someone wanted to just come and see what I was doing. Maybe they were trying to imitate me in some fashion. It was a weird experience for sure. There was never any other similar experience in that apartment, nor any other inexplicable occurrence. I have no real explanation for what occurred that day. So, those are my brushes with the paranormal. Nothing very dramatic, but creepy in their humble way. I thought that perhaps someone here might get a little chill from them, so I submit them for your enjoyment. Childhood Memories from Sicklin. I'm not exactly sure how old I was when all these short stories occurred, but I have several in different locations. Keep in mind all these stories have taken place in good old northern Kentucky. These are several small stories put into one post. I've always had run-ins with ghosts. Some I've seen and others I haven't. This particular experience takes place in my grandparents' old house before it was torn down and a double-wide trailer was put up there. That upsets me because my grandfather after the war actually lived in the basement with a tarp overhead and built the beautiful house on what I want to say was about 10 acres of land. When I was a young lad at one point, my mother and I lived with my grandparents. Come to find out, a spirit lived in the house as well. My grandmother named him Charlie. We always knew when Charlie was either mad or just in a good mood. When he was in a good mood, he would play a nice tune on the piano my grandparents owned. If he was in an angry mood, he would throw all the picture frames from on top of the piano. Another story my mom had told me when I was a young lad was when we lived in a house with her then boyfriend. One night they went into the bedroom to go to bed and turn the lights off. In the middle of the night, they heard a noise that sounded like a Zippo flipping open and closed. Her boyfriend had a Zippo lighter to light his cigarettes with, and that's what it sounded like. So, understandably, my mom asked him, "Why do you keep flipping your Zippo open like that?" He replied, "I'm not." My mother then proceeded to get up and flip the lights on, as they kept hearing that noise. Their attention turned to the gun cabinet with the shotguns and rifles pointed up and unloaded at the time. When they looked over, they were horrified, because the triggers on the guns were clicking by themselves, as if they were trying to fire on their own. Not sure how to react, they just laid back down and eventually fell asleep. Fast forward a few hours as the sun rose, they were about to get out of bed. My mother woke in a pool of blood on her pillow. There were no cuts or wounds, just blood, a puddle of it, all over the pillow her head rested on while she slept. As for the final story, one day I was talking to my mother at the top of the stairs, and all of a sudden, I was shoved by something, and I went flying down those steps. My mother claimed she saw what seemed to be a black figure at the top of the steps after it happened. In the same house on another day, her purse mysteriously teleported from downstairs on the counter to her bed in the bedroom. At the same place again, we owned an early 90s Honda. It was a cold day and snowy, so my mother started to walk out and towards the car to warm it up before she had to go to work. Before she reached the car, the windshield wipers just came on, with absolutely no power going to the car. These are a few of many of the stories with the ghostly people I've encountered. I can't say that I was ever scared of them. Rather, I was very interested in the subject. To all the other writers out there, please keep the stories coming, as I love to hear what you've all encountered in this strange and beautiful world. Thank you for listening to my stories.